Do you remember the first time that mobile phones were available in Sri Lanka? Those big, bulky ones. In fact, one might even in the colloquial language call it the Gadolbage model. One would even say that it was dual purpose for communication and in a certain case, even as a mechanism of defense. But that era seems to be so far away. Today, mobile phones have become smaller and most importantly, smarter. Hard to think of a corporate life or even a personal life without the mobile phones, from personal communications to entertainment to corporate business activities. Nothing escapes the paradigm of mobile communication. Sri Lanka, a small country indeed, but one that has been staying ahead of the curve in the mobile penetration and even the mobile telecommunication technology sector. In fact, from the entire South Asian region, we were among the first to be bringing in some of the modern telecommunication spectrum, such as 4G and so on. Where exactly is the current mobile communication industry of Sri Lanka heading? What are the potential opportunities? When you've got 140% penetration, is it a red ocean of competition or a sea of blue ocean opportunities to innovate? This will be our focus today here in Bisnomics, and as always, we intend to be your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I'm Thandu Amarasekara, and our special guest for today is none other than the CEO of Hutchinson Telecom, who is Mr. Thirukumar Nadarasa. Mr. Nadarasa, welcome to Bisnomics. Absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Nadarasa, let's get to some numbers first. How big is the mobile telecommunication industry in Sri Lanka? You can give us a general overview of the overall telecommunication industry.
Right. The mobile telecom industry in Sri Lanka has been growing quite rapidly over the last decade, as you mentioned in the introduction. Today, we have nearly 32 million mobile customers. So that's a penetration, as you also mentioned, closer to 145–50%. So it's been growing quite rapidly. And in terms of revenue numbers, we estimate that the revenue would be around 150 billion rupees annually of turnover.
Massive
so
one.
It's quite a big business.
And what would you see? I mean, you've seen the action happening in this industry. If you look at, let's say if we go decade-wise, the 90s, the early 2000s, 2010s, and now we are in the 2020 decade, what have been the significant moments, you would say, in this sector during those different decades?
I think the first significant moment would be back in the late 90s when GSM was introduced in this country, and a digital phone was finally available that gave additional services that weren't available in analog phone. And then the next significant milestone was the launch of the first broadband mobile device or service in under 3G. And that was another great milestone that we achieved. And as you mentioned also, we've been a leader in the region, where in the region we have been at the forefront of introducing these latest technologies way ahead of our regional countries. And of course, then the latest technologies that have been launched in the last few years has been 4G, which has been an enhancement on 3G technology.
Correct. Now, if you look at the telecommunication sector, especially the mobile communication, that's your area of expertise, and that's where the action happening and what excites us as a business analyst as well, or an industry analyst too. One thing I've noticed, Mr. Nadarasa, is that initially when the phones were introduced, when the mobile phones were introduced, it was all about the voice call.
Yes.
You know, minimizing the voice call. Maybe maximum you'll get 1 or 2 SMSs a day.
Yes.
However, today things have moved away from voice. In fact, there are sometimes people using the mobile phone not at all for voice, but entirely for other services like, for example, data. Now, we'll come to the revenue part separately, but how exciting is this development for you as a mobile communication provider?
It's very exciting. As you said in the beginning, the mobile device, like the fixed telephone, was used purely for voice calls. I call you, you call me, and that's it.
Correct.
Now, as we move into a broadband device, meaning 3G or 4G device, it opened up a whole new universe of opportunity and use.
Nowadays we call multiverses.
That's right, which is information, data, which can be shared and accessed globally from the device. So this really opened up the opportunities for both the industry as well as for the customer to really expand his knowledge and accessibility to information.
Now, I'm going to give the business twist to that same question.
Right.
Now, if you look at the telcos, while it's an exciting development for a consumer, and yes, to a certain extent as to the service provider as well, I mean, I'm quite sure that there are certain revenue implications that come with this, because earlier the people who used to call are now avoiding the call. They are now directly calling over WhatsApp, or maybe they'll take the call via Zoom. There's voice messaging. I mean, instead of calling, we just send voice messages to each other. So how do telcos, and especially mobile communication providers, manage to sustain the revenue model and the revenue generation part, especially with this transformation towards the data usage more than the voice usage?
You know, as happening in many industries, not just telecom, you know, technology is evolving that business, and the same thing has applied to telecom mobile business. Yes, so in the beginning, we all depended on mobile calls and mobile revenue, where you make a call and we earn some money. But technology has evolved, and we have to evolve with it. And as data usage increased, you know, people have started to use OTT calling, WhatsApp calling, instead of making a phone call. And we've had to evolve our business model and business plan accordingly, and our cost structure to also evolve. And you know, I'm sure you know, you've seen in many industries, if you don't evolve, you die. And we've had to evolve.
What happened to the dinosaurs?
Correct. And we have to evolve, and I think we've been quite successful in evolving with the market, with the demand, and continuing to address and serve the ever-changing needs of the consumer.
Now, your organization, Hutchinson Telecom, you have been operating over the last few decades. I don't want you to spill out any company secret formulas. I mean, that's not our intention. But clearly, you have been adopting and evolving. For example, I've read some instances where you preferred to go more rural in some cases because you realized the potential that was there. Would you like to share some of the thinking that has helped your organization to evolve, and hopefully other companies, not only in telecommunication, but even in their other businesses which are connected with mobile communication, can use some of that thinking to evolve themselves?
Right. We have always focused on the market that, you know, Sri Lanka is an emerging market. This is not England or Hong Kong, etc. So it's an emerging market. And in emerging markets like Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, you know, affordability is a key factor. Maybe not in other Western countries, you know, where they can afford to spend more money. So we've always focused on delivering the most affordable and accessible service to the consumer. And, you know, yes, everyone, you know, when we came into the market, yes, you have other competitors in the market, and they were focusing in Colombo and on the higher income groups, fine. So we decided that instead of just joining that party, we would try and serve the underserved or the non-served population, which essentially was the rural people outside. And we developed our services to be affordable and accessible to that market segment, and from which we have grown a quite successful business.
Excellent thinking there. Now, with regard to the telecommunication sector, we see, for example, multiple different generations of technologies coming in. So we first had 2G, yes, and then there was, I believe, 2.5G, that was with Edge, where right, you had the messaging capabilities, etc. 3G, then 4G, and now the latest talk of the town is 5G, correct, which is being trialed out, I believe. Right. So when these new technologies come in, what happens to the previous technologies? I will come to the operating and investment part later, the cost part later. But what exactly happens to the older technologies when the new technologies come in?
Yeah. So the old technologies will coexist along with the new technologies for a certain period of time. Because, for example, 2G subscribers, even after we launch 3G or even 4G, there are still going to be subscribers with a 2G phone.
Correct.
So we can't tell them, sorry, no more 2G service. You know, your phone is lost, your phone is gone, you're going to buy a 3G device. So we have to continue to serve the 2G customer as well as the new 3G and 4G customer as we evolve. So over the course of several years, you know, people will then buy a new phone, it'll be a smartphone, and they'll move to 3G and 4G. So as a result, we have to run and operate both networks, both together over a period of time. And at some period, we will then switch off the technology, the old technology.
For example, recently we saw, not in mobile communication service, but with regard to mobile devices, I believe some of the old BlackBerry phone. BlackBerry at one time was a corporate status symbol, but I believe now recently they stopped supporting some of the old devices.
Right. And even in some countries around the world, they've now announced plans to shut down 3G.
Oh,
you
wow.
know, and move
Shutting down 3G.
completely and
Unthinkable 10 years ago.
That's right. And moving to 4G. So that would happen at the time when everyone is moved and evolved. Obviously, we can't switch it off until everyone's moved, or 95% or 90% are moved. And then we switch off the spectrum, we'll switch off the network. Then what happens is we'll use the same spectrum to deploy the advanced 4G and 5G services. So it's not as if the spectrum is also wasted. We'll then use a spectrum to deploy 4G and 5G services, which the added advantage is that it gives you more capacity.
Correct.
3G and 4G and 5G gives you more capacity for the investment you're making, so that more people and more usage can be loaded onto the network, whereas before on the old technology it could not be.
And as you very correctly said, I believe all these generations of technologies, end of the day, mobile technology as a whole, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Nadarasa,
Yes.
runs on the fundamental basis of CDMA, code division multiple access, isn't it?
Yes.
It's about how well you divide the spectrum
Right.
and enable more capacity.
Correct.
And the newer technologies are enabling more transmission of capacity.
When you had when you had 2G, during the days of 2G when the voice was there was actually two camps. There was the GSM camp and the CDMA camp.
Correct.
Then as you moved to broadband, it was seen that CDMA was a more efficient way of delivering broadband data service. So now the industry's pretty much moved to a CDMA-based technology, which is 3G and 4G and etc.
Interesting. Now, once again, the business side of things.
Yes.
As these new technologies come in from 3G to 4G to 5G, etc., what happens to the old investments that were provided? Now, yes, to a certain extent, you can piggyback on some of those for the delivery of these new as well, but I'm quite sure there are significant cost and investment management trade-offs which are happening.
Correct.
Tell us what goes inside the boardroom when deciding what to drop, what to continue.
Well, the good news is that when we move to a new technology, we're not dumping the whole infrastructure into the bin. Certain infrastructure like towers and transmission, power, can continue into the new technology. It's only the radio equipment that you put on the tower and the antenna that has to be changed. So the entire original investment is not wasted.
Good news.
That's good news. So maybe about 20-30% has to be then recycled and new technologies are put in. So the investment is not so difficult. The only issue is, as I mentioned about as you move into 3G, 4G, 5G, and you need more capacity. What that means also is that you need more sites. So that's where the cost comes in. So you might save the cost you have today, most of it. But the thing is, when you start deploying 4G and 5G, you need to double your number of sites, and that is the investment question that you have to think about. Okay. We need to double the sites. Can we invest that kind of numbers, and do we get an ROI? That's the problem more. It's not so much the old investment that we have to worry about too much.
It's about the new sites and the new investments that are required along with it.
That's right.
Fantastic thoughts there for the opening segment. Mr. Nadarasa, looking forward to continuing this discussion after the break.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We will be back after this short break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics. We are in conversation with Mr. Thirukumar Nadarasa regarding the mobile communication sector, the opportunities, the challenges, and the way forward. Mr. Nadarasa, let's talk about the next big thing that everyone is talking about now, 5G. It's being spoken about as the next big thing, where due to almost zero latency, you can have real-time conversations. And I believe in the Mobile World Congress where it was first time introduced, there was a doctor from the Congress directing a live surgery in another country, I believe in Spain. And this was done in real time and showing the potential of it. And here at the same time, some people are even accusing 5G of being behind some of the medical issues and even COVID spread, etc. I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories, there's a lot of opportunity stories going around. But overall, I think there's no doubt that 5G is the next big thing.
Yes.
Question is, what makes 5G so much better than the previous generations? And number two, as a nation, how ready is Sri Lanka for the 5G adoption?
I think, there's a lot of
hype.
There's a lot of hype. You're correct. There's a lot of hype in the industry about 5G, as there was, if you remember, a few years ago about 4G. I think it's part of the industry hype, trying to promote the next technology.
Correct.
But
6G will have a bigger hype.
That's right. The 6G will be the next hype. But I want to explain in simpler terms. We moved into broadband with 3G. broadband is just essentially a pipe, a data pipe, which we all share. It's not like we have one pipe each. 4G was a bigger pipe with a bigger capacity. So we have more data on the network that we can all use. Essentially, 5G is going to be yet another bigger pipe. So the main application or use of 5G will be to offer more capacity to us. Every year, people are using more and more data. They're watching Netflix, they're watching movies. The consumption is growing rapidly every year.
Now the education worldwide is running on data.
Correct. So the demand for data capacity is critical, and 5G is there to solve that capacity when we need it, when our 4G network runs out of capacity. So for me, that's a primary reason for 5G. Now, yes, there's the advantage of latency. Of course, 5G technology has a much lower latency, so it allows you, for example, like remote surgery, a better gaming experience where you can play that much faster. But for me, that is there. But I think there has to be still a lot more significant amount more of development of applications to really justify that advantage. But the point I always say today is that pretty much I always say, this is my personal view, 80 to 90% of all so-called 5G applications today could, in theory, be run on a well-run 4G network. So if you have a good 4G network, pretty much 80% of it can be run on a 4G network. You don't need a 5G network today. Correct. Yes, there is a 10-20%, like you said, remote surgery. Yes, of course, you can't do it on 4G, you have to do it on 5G. But I think there is time for us to really use our 4G network. Correct. And when
we still haven't got the full potential of 4G out yet.
And the number of applications have not come yet for 5G to justify. Because again, 5G, you mentioned earlier about investment. 5G is it's a doubling of investment of 4G. I mean, it's not small money. So you're going to have to double the investment you made. If you spend $100 million on 4G, you're going to spend $200 million on 5G because more sites. Problem. So then you got to think carefully now, when I'm going to spend that much money, I better have enough use cases that doesn't need 4G, that cannot work on 4G, can only work on 5G to justify the investment. So from a business perspective, we have to think very carefully when is the right time for us to deploy this technology.
Interesting thoughts. Mr. Nadarasa, the seat you are in, I know it's very comfortable for you right now, yes. But time and again, I like to spice it up and heat it up and make it a hot seat. So I'm throwing you a bit of a challenge here. Yes. My next question, the focus is on the competition, the level of competition. Now, when you have a market with 140% penetration, that based on the fundamentals of economics, sounds like a red ocean of competition. What are your thoughts on the competition, number one? Number two, bit of a challenging question. This is not to put you in trouble or anything, but I'd like to know the industry insider's perspective on this. Now, when there is so much competition, the level of services and the customer service, all that is expected to go up. Yet, Sri Lanka was ranked among one of the countries with very bad internet connectivity. I'm sure you're aware of this as well. Yes. As an industry insider, what are your thoughts on that? So those are the two questions I have. What do you think on the competition, and why do you think we got such a bad ranking?
I'm a firm believer in competition. I think competition is good. It's good for everyone. It's good for the consumer. It's good for the operator as well. It keeps everybody on their toes. And it keeps us motivated to do better, to serve better. Whether it's the telecom industry or the airline industry or the hotel industry, I think competition is good. It really pushes us to reduce costs, to deliver better service. So I'm very open to competition. Even
so the fundamental basis is I get better when I see you getting better.
Correct, and you get better. I learn from you, and I get better, and we feed each other.
And the customer gets served better.
Correct,
and win.
Correct. As a result, I'll get on to the report you mentioned earlier. But as a result, today Sri Lanka, because of this competition, has one of the lowest tariffs in the world. I believe we're in the top 10 lowest tariffs in the world. Now that didn't happen because of a monopoly. It happened because of a high competition. Correct. That allowed us to compete and bring the price of service down to consumers. So today it's extremely affordable to everybody in Sri Lanka. So competition is good, and I think it's something that every industry needs to really develop and improve themselves. Now going on to the report, the internet quality report, etc. Now that was a very this happened in the midst of COVID environment, and it was for me and I think for the industry, it was a kind of ad hoc report that caught that caught us at the wrong time. As you mentioned, in the introduction, Sri Lanka has been at the forefront of deploying advanced telecom technologies in Sri Lanka, in the region.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when Sri Lanka introduced, I believe, 3.5G a few decades back, at that time, in some of the mobile conferences in India, they were saying, look, Sri Lanka might overtake us at this rate. We were a threat.
We were ahead of India at that time. So they may have been worried about us going too far ahead of us. But in fact we were ahead of India, in those early days.
Correct.
And they were behind us in that respect. So I think this report is a very unfortunate one-off report that came during the COVID. I think we'll be discussing that in a bit, where the traffic suddenly surged, and
unprecedented levels.
Unprecedented surge. And really caught the industry, kind of hopping.
Correct.
Which this is as you can imagine, it's a once in a lifetime event.
And Mr. Nadarasa, I think we both can agree on the fact that a pandemic is not something that appears in the radar in your worst of the worst case scenarios, correct, even if you do scenario plan.
Correct. Exactly. Normally, any mobile operator, again, keeping in mind costs, would plan for his next year's expansion, 10%, 20%. Okay, let's build 20% capacity.
Correct.
But when your usage goes up 100%, there's no way you're going to be able to handle it.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, the report was taken during that time. Of course, now things are kind of going back to normal.
Yes.
But it was just an unfortunate snapshot that came at that wrong time.
It doesn't always really paint the proper picture.
No.
Mr. Nadarasa, my next question is regarding the mobile usage during the times of the pandemic.
Yes.
Definitely it got heavier. From a mobile operator's perspective, what did you actually go through as an organization? We would love to hear that. I mean, what did the industry go through? It's easier for us on the outside to complain, saying, internet is bad, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. But I'm sure that there's always two sides to any story. What was the story of the industry?
Right. See, the good news for the industry, I'll get to the bad news in a minute, but the good news is that, the data traffic increased rapidly. And as I mentioned earlier, traffic grew by 100% in a year, which is unprecedented. And the other advantage of other silver lining of COVID was that it created it accelerated the awareness of data and internet connectivity in the country. People knew about data and knew about internet, but one day I'll get a smartphone. But the COVID environment, lockdown environment, accelerated that awareness and need for data internet connectivity. So those are the positives that we saw from the COVID. The negative, of course, was the traffic caught everybody by surprise. Now, as I mentioned, most normal planning, you're planning 10, 20%. In Hutchinson case, we are extremely lucky, again, timing, because we just concluded a merger between Etisalat and Hutch, and we just concluded that in 2019. And we were busy merging the network in 2020, 1920, and where we also deployed a brand new advanced 4G network on top of this merged network. So when the pandemic hit,
you had the capacity and the technology.
Correct. We were sitting, we had the network, we had an empty network to be able to absorb the traffic.
Understood.
Whereas the other operators, unfortunately, were in normal operating mode, had faced difficulty because they would obviously, again, no one can plan for that kind of
Correct.
traffic growth.
So, in terms of the mobile communications during the pandemic,
yes, Of
course, there's a doubling up of the demand, but were there any observed changes in the user behavior and so on?
Oh yes, that's very, very much so. I think, particularly with the severe lockdowns we face in Sri Lanka, people had to start learning, online shopping, online banking. They had to start learning all these online study, online work from home. So all these tremendous, particularly study, were tremendous changes in behavior that happened because of COVID, and that accelerated the adoption of data and internet in this country very much, which I hope will continue. Obviously post COVID, where people are now got a taste of the convenience of online connectivity and accessibility.
Sure.
That they will continue that in the future.
Ms. Nadarasa, once again, from a company perspective, now people sometimes might forget that you're also, as an organization, you need your people to run it, but when the lockdowns, the curfews, they affect your people too. So how interesting and challenging was it to keep up with this 100% rise of demand while your staff is not always able to come to work, they have to work from home.
Correct.
They might be in certain areas where they can't travel to Colombo. You have to organize traveling permissions.
Yes.
Surely it must have been a challenging and interesting time.
Yes.
Share some experiences with us.
No, it was. It was a very, very interesting and challenging time. And I think in our case, for example, our call center. Now we have a call center. We'll have 50, 100 people in one location answering calls. Now that couldn't continue because no one can come. So we had to now distribute our agents into their homes, and we had agents sitting in their home answering calls for us. So we had to extend connectivity, extend the computer connections, etc., so they could answer calls from their home. So that was a very radical change to how we did our job. And of course, the normal administrative staff were all connected online. Luckily, maybe I suppose since we were a telecom company, we had the telecom connections to facilitate all our staff to be sitting at home on their laptops, connected, and be able to do the work virtually as they would be in the office. So we were very fortunate. Maybe unlike the tourist industry or a manufacturing facility where you have no choice, you have to be there at the factory, otherwise nothing gets produced. As a service industry, we're able to continue to deliver service to the consumer while still being able to work from home. And I think there's one thing I must commend, without sounding biased, to the industry that I think people should appreciate with this huge emergency and this huge demand for traffic. I think the industry did come through with flying colors. We did manage to keep the machine running, connectivity going during this very difficult period. I think that should be recognized and appreciated
for sure.
By everybody.
What is the market potential for value-added services in this sector? Let's talk about that on the other side of this short break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. We are in conversation with Mr. Thirukumar Nadarasa on the potential of the mobile communication industry of Sri Lanka. Mr. Nadarasa, let's talk about one of the very interesting areas, which is value-added services. Now, I remember my first mobile phone was way back in 2001. I did well at the term test, and I got a phone, and I'm quite sure that phone brand and model is not there. Maybe that company doesn't make phones anymore. But I remember back then, the only value-added service was where you can check the cricket score. And you send a message and you get it. And unlike now, may I say, we used to get a lot of good, happy news whenever we checked the cricket score back then. But now I think the game has evolved, the game has changed. Ringtones to ringing tones to separate content portal. Mobile companies today are publishing their own video content and short drama series, etc. Where is this whole thing heading? And I'm quite sure it's an exciting experience.
It is. And like your younger days experience,
I like to consider myself still young.
Okay.
Maybe I call it extremely younger days.
Right. In the original mobile services at that time, the basic services was SMS based, like you mentioned about cricket alerts. It was essentially SMS based.
Correct.
So astrology alerts, cricket alerts,
Diet alerts. Never
alerts.
Followed them though.
Correct.
Never mind.
So it's essentially centered around SMSE, which was in our network, and people will connect and feed content to customers. Of course, the other popular one was, of course, ringtones, as I mentioned again, getting a nice ringing tone on your call when you receive the call or make a call. So essentially, SMS-based services and ringtones were the main VAS services. Now, once you get into broadband and digital services, it really opens up, a whole new, universe of potential services, because you're talking about the multimedia element. Video, audio. So, you can bring in a lot of other services, things like, movie streaming, which of course you couldn't do, on a previous GSM phone. Movie streaming, gaming, gaming before you had to have a fancy console in your house and you kind of set it up and you play it. Now, your mobile device can do a real life gaming experience
with PUBG and all these games, Fortnite, etc.
So these are fantastic new services that can now be value-added services that can be supported on a broadband network. In terms of how we look at this in terms of business opportunity, these you mentioned PUBG, Netflix. These require strategic partnerships, because we ourselves cannot develop a Netflix. We ourselves cannot develop a PUBG.
And similarly, Netflix cannot develop a mobile communication network.
Correct. So the key to success is us working with global and local strategic partners to bring these wonderful services to consumers where we work together. I provide the network, they provide the content, and we offer this bundle service to consumers. So in that context, there's it's unlimited opportunity which we can offer to consumers. We can offer them anything that can be bought, down the tube.
And doesn't it also provide opportunities for many more economic actors in the country? For example, it can be a talented young boy in a rural area, instead of relying on these big producers and all that and losing his chances, he can easily come up with a nice song, maybe reach out to the telecommunication network, and through you have it available as a ringtone or available in your portals. Am I correct?
Correct, very much so. And I think here again, I'd like to mention that, even though we are fierce competitors in the industry, we're also collaborators. We also work together, in many areas. Dialogue's Easy Cash, we all work together. No point me having a wallet, you having a wallet, and trying to promote different wallets. It doesn't work. Similarly, there's a service that was developed initially by Dialogue called IdeaMart, which we are also working together with. We joined the consortium. IdeaMart is a platform that allows young entrepreneurs to develop applications and apps themselves.
Correct.
And put it onto that platform.
An ecosystem.
And offer it to the consumer and earn an income. So these kind of platforms enable, a young IT executive, IT person living in the outstation somewhere in Kurunagala or in particular to develop a product, put it up on the platform and earn some money. You don't have
Hence you're thinking that increasingly the mobile networks are no longer really about the mobile network per se, but about the IT infrastructure of it as well.
Yes, very much so. So it's a tremendous opportunity for much more people to participate in this business and earn an income. It's not just for playing games, but they can actually make good money.
And do you believe that it's an interesting time because data seems to be definitely a bigger business opportunity than voice?
Definitely. Again, we are evolving. We will be evolving to the day. One day it will be all data, and voice will not be there. You mentioned earlier that today the young children, young kids especially, don't even call. I have a son and daughter. They don't talk. They just message. So it's going to move to the point one day where it will be almost 100% data. 5G is 100% data.
5G is 100% data.
Okay, so it's moving in that direction. So all your voice and messaging and communications will then all become data, OTT, or etc. And it'll become 100% data. And we have to evolve our network and our business accordingly to become essentially a 100% data network.
Ms. Nadarasa, now, despite the high penetration and at the same time the high level of coverage, still we see the echoing, rumbling, mumbling of the complaint that we are not getting enough coverage, that some parts of the country are not still covered. And even still, when you travel, you do realize some areas you don't have 3G or 4G, you're running on the edge, etc. What can be done? My question is, firstly, what are the challenges that operators are facing when serving the entire nation? Right. And what initiatives are there on the way to address this?
There are two issues that come together to make this issue. One issue is the basic radio. When we put up a tower, we cover a certain area of the country geographically. So you put up two towers, you cover, So normally we deploy towers by population. Where's the population, we deploy. And we go down the pyramid, so to speak, to find less and lesser populated areas where we put towers. So today, as an industry, we are covering 95, 96, 97% of the population today. But of course, there's still that 3%, 5% who are living out there who doesn't get that coverage, and unfortunately they're the ones making the headlines. But you have to understand that if from an investment perspective and from a radio coverage perspective, if you need 2,000 towers to cover 95%, you will need 4,000 towers to cover 100% because there's a diminishing return.
Correct.
So if you want to get 100% population or 100% geographic coverage, you're going to need to double your investment, but then you're only getting 5% more of the population and revenue.
There's an issue with the business numbers there.
There's an issue here, Now, the other compounding factor, as I mentioned earlier, was that as the technology evolved from GSM to 3G to 4G, 5G, the frequency spectrum makes the coverage smaller. So GSM 900 can cover a radius of 10 kilometers. So every tower 10 kilometers, fine, we get coverage, fantastic. But then you get down to 3G, 4G, you're talking about coverage of 3 to 4 kilometers. So now you need more towers to cover the same area as the original voice GSM network. That's why people say, oh, I've got GSM, but I've got no 3G. What happened? Where's my 4G? What happened? Because the coverage is smaller, so we need more 4G towers to cover. So that is always the issue, that we need to keep deploying more and more towers to catch up with the voice coverage that we have already in this place. So we will keep developing and expanding. But one initiative I must highlight here was by the previous Director General of TRC, Mr. Oshada Senanaika. He had launched this initiative called the Gamata Sanyavedya.
Gamata Sanyavedana,
correct. Sorry, my pronunciation. Where we have worked together with the government and the industry together, and we've set up an objective to cover the remaining 5% working together. Okay, so the government is a public-private partnership where we'll work together and we will cover that last 5%, over the next year or two, and finally achieve that full coverage we aim for. So that is in progress, and as industry, we will get to that point.
There's another initiative that he also tried to bring in, and I want to know on which camp you are in. This may be a bit of a controversial question, but I know I'm pretty sure you know where I'm heading with this as well. Yes. The mobile number portability.
Yes.
Which camp are you in? Yes or no?
Yes is my answer. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a firm believer in competition. The more the competition, the better. I don't believe in artificial barriers to competition. Okay, and for me, mobile number portability has been a barrier. You have had a number for 10 years, 15 years. Obviously,
it's a part of my identity.
Correct, and if the service may not be good, but you have no choice. You're stuck with it because you can't change the number or you can't move to another operator. So it's a barrier. So that's why I'm saying, I'm a firm believer we should remove that barrier and let people choose, and not let that be a hindrance to you going for the best service or best option available. So I'm a firm believer, I think with the DG, that this should come. And actually, this is one area where we are late. Other countries in the region have
I believe India has already gone.
Correct, India, Pakistan, they've all implemented. So there's one item that we unfortunately have been left behind, which we now need to catch up.
Is there any update on that initiative? We know it was about to be brought in by the previous
DG. The implementation is in progress. It's a very complex system because you're connecting all the network operators together into a central hub. Since you're an IT person, you understand, where you need to exchange the number change. So it's a very complex project. It won't be done in 1 month, 2 months.
Yes.
We're talking about 6 months, 12 months. So it's in process. All I can say.
On a final question, Mr. Nadarasa, I would like to ask you, as one of the main players in the telecommunication or the mobile communication industry in Sri Lanka, what more support in terms of policies and strategies would you expect from the government? It's not about criticizing everything they do or anything, but obviously as a business of such scale, you would have certain expectations. You would be expecting certain support. What kind of support and initiatives are you expecting, especially in terms of policies, are you expecting from the government? Or what should the government do to make sure that this mobile communication industry can keep flourishing and be the benchmark standard-setting body in the region?
Correct. Now, we're talking about 5G. We're talking about 4G, we're talking about 5G. And what 5G, as I mentioned earlier, 5G means more sites. We had to put more towers. Okay, otherwise we'll never achieve that coverage, proper coverage and capacity. Getting sites and getting site approvals and getting a permission to install a site is quite a long and arduous process. There are up to 10 different local authorities, government authorities, which we need to get approval from, local authorities, civil aviation, etc. And as a result, this actually hinders what we were discussing earlier. How can we achieve 100% coverage to the people and get everybody connected, and Correct. Then on to 5G. So I think this is one area. I think the industry together with the TRC have been battling this and working on this, trying to get all the various departments in the government to work together and cooperate together to understand the national interest is there for us to facilitate the rapid rollout of new towers so that people can get connected. So I think this is something that I think the government is trying, and I think they have been making good efforts there. But if we can facilitate that better, that will facilitate future development of 4G and 5G.
Understood. Mr. Thirukumar Nadarasa, absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Wish you good luck in all your future endeavors and ensuring that the mobile telecommunication sector of the country keeps growing in leaps and bounds. And all the best to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. Thank you very much.
Mobile communication, a key defining factor in the success of your business and even in the convenience of your day-to-day life. Our focus was on the way forward for this industry and what needs to be done. And we here in TV1 hope that the telecommunication industry and the mobile communication industry keeps growing and ensuring that the sector in Sri Lanka is on par and even above and beyond the rest of the region and at a world-class level, because that would ensure ease of business and successful business operations as well. I'm Tharandu Amarasekara, and no matter what business you may be in, have a profitable week ahead.